Hi, I'm Jay. I want to talk about The Lord of the Rings. Again. And back again. Ayy. You might notice that this video is very strangely lit. That would be due to this, which is dead. So I am using 3 lamps instead. Don't you love just like constant technical difficulties? They're not even difficulties, they're just the fact that I don't know how to do any of this. Lighting crazy, we're gonna have to deal. Okay, this video is part 3. It's a recap of the 3rd Lord of the Rings movie, Return of the King, but we're gonna add the lore that the movie skipped, filling contextual gaps. If you're watching this video and you haven't seen the first 2 recaps, you should probably watch those, because for this one, we're gonna have to reference a bunch of stuff that happened during the other movies. Also, this movie is 4.5 hours long. The extended edition is, anyway. Lord of the Rings fans will murder you if you ever want to watch the theatrical versions of the movies, which are a bit shorter, despite still being 3 to 3.5 hour long films. But I'm gonna be so honest right now, and I'm awaiting my imminent murder. For the first 2 movies, the extended stuff is gratuitous. Patently. That's why it's not in the theatrical cuts of the movies. It's not required in order to understand the story. However, in Return of the King, for some reason, a lot of the scenes that were added for the extended edition kind of are required to understand the story. Like, in order for the sequence of events to make sense. Without them, it is a lot of, when did they get on these boats? Is that guy dead or not? How do these 2 people know each other? Why would that just be sitting in the water? This to say that in the past 2 videos, I've been operating more based on the theatrical editions. In this one, we are going to use the extended edition. Also, because this movie is so long, we're not going to take as many asides for shit that happens in the book, but not in the movies. So, quick recap of who is where. At the start of this movie, we have 3 separate teams. Ignore these guys for now. But 2 of them are going to combine basically right away. Regardless, at the moment, we have Team Besties and Horse Girls, which consists of Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Gandalf from the original Fellowship, and then Theoden and Éomer, who are men of Rohan, which we have been referring to as horse girls, because that's what they are. Éowyn is listed as being in this team because she's basically attached to these 2, but she's not physically with us right now. This group starts the movie by pulling up to Isengard, which is here, where they immediately meet up with Team Ents. Oh, I forgot to draw the Ents again. They are pretty forgettable. They're also barely in this movie, so it's fine. Anyway, Team Ents is Merry, Pippin, and Treebeard, who are just chilling in Isengard. And then finally we have Team Ring, which is Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, who spent the last book and movie wandering around trying to find a way into Mordor, which is what they are currently still doing. This group is our villains, this group is our irrelevant elves, and this is Faramir, who had captured Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, but he just let them go, so they've just left him. And now he's by himself doing something, we don't know. We open Return of the King by seeing how Gollum got the ring and became Gollum. Before, he was a regular dude named Smeagol, and we already talked about that in the first video. But long story short, 500-ish years ago, Smeagol is fishing with his cousin. The cousin's name is Deagle, that doesn't matter at all. Deagle sucks at fishing, and also sucks at picking things up. You don't need to grab the whole dirt. You're disturbing the benthic ecosystem. Deagle, the cousin, sees the ring in the river, where it has been since it... Oh, Isildur. I no longer have a picture of Isildur. New strat. Genius. This is what I get for moving in the middle of a video series. Anyway, remember, Isildur was a fancy king of men a really long time ago. He had the ring for a while, etc. So Deagle sees the ring in the river, where it has been since it abandoned Isildur during an orc ambush like 2,500 years ago. So Deagle grabs the ring, and again, also like half of the fucking riverbed, and Smeagol sees the ring and he's like, wow, I want that really bad. I think I'm gonna kill my cousin about it. This turns out to be an unpopular decision. So he gets exiled from his community, takes the ring, goes and lives in a cave for 500 years. We know this. Also, apparently the reason he's called Gollum is because that's the sound he makes when he coughs. Pokemon-ass naming scheme. Currently though, with Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, we are somewhere in the middle of nowhere poking around the outskirts of Mordor. We see that the ring is continuing to get to Frodo. What else is new? We also have a conversation where Sam is like, hey, I've been rationing our magical elf bread, so we should have enough. And Frodo's like, enough for what? And Sam goes, for the journey back home. And Frodo's like... Meanwhile, the Besties 3 and their associated horse girls are pulling up to Isengard, where they find Merry and Pippin, who are sitting around smoking weed. As they should, I guess. Isengard has already been destroyed by the Ent invasion, so we get up to speed on that. And we find out that Treebeard has apparently taken up management of Isengard. He should turn it into a Walmart. Don't you think Middle-earth would look better if it had like a whole bunch of flat parking lots in it? All of Isengard is flooded, which we did on purpose, but we can still walk around. Anyway, we collect Merry and Pippin. We're standing in front of Orthanc, which is the tower in Isengard, discussing what we want to do about Saruman, whose tower it is. And Gandalf's like, well, we should capture him alive so that we can interrogate him, because we need to know what Sauron's next steps are. Fair. As we're talking, Saruman appears on top of the tower. There would appear to be no roof access door here, so I'm assuming it's like a hatch trapdoor thing, like an attic. Anyway, Saruman does some evil monologuing for a bit, during which he reveals that he has that all-purpose orb we've mentioned a couple times. And Gandalf is clearly like, ah, fuck, that's not good. I hate the all-purpose orb. While this conversation is happening, Grima also appears on top of the tower. So the roof access hatch is not locked, I guess, which is dangerous. Theoden, way down on the ground, tries to convince Grima to stop being evil and come play for our team. Instead, Saruman slaps Grima, and Grima responds by stabbing him several times. Legolas shoots Grima to stop him, but like it's done. So now Saruman and Grima are both dead. Grima just dies where he is, but Saruman falls off the whole tower and lands on a spiky thing that impales him. Unfortunately, it is hilarious. Everyone on the ground is like, well, fuck, we needed Saruman alive. What do we do now? While they're talking, we see that the all-purpose orb falls out of Saruman's robe, so now it's just loose on the ground in flooded Isengard. This entire scene, the conversation with Saruman, his and Grima's deaths, the orb falling into the water, is not in the theatrical cut of the movie. You just never see these characters again. And when we find the orb, it's just like, oh, how did this get here? Which is weird. Why would this be one of the scenes that you skip? Also, I should point out, this scene doesn't happen in the book either, but that's because in the book, Saruman and Grima don't actually die here. In the first video, I mentioned an event called the Scouring of the Shire, which only happens in the books. It's the second to last chapter of the entire series, and it's basically just the hobbits return home to see that the Shire is getting fucked up. In the books, Saruman and Grima are the ones leading the fucking up of the Shire, and they die during that. It's still the same methods though. Saruman gets stabbed by Grima, Grima gets shot with arrows, etc. But this is about the movies, we're sticking with the movie version. Now you might be asking, why did Saruman go out so easily? Isn't he a wizard and therefore a divine being? Yeah, he is. But even if their spirit is intact, the wizard's physical bodies can still die, like Gandalf's did in the first movie. On Saruman's end though, his spirit is kind of also fucked, because now the Valar won't let him into Valinor because he's been doing all this evil shit. So he is like eternally doomed now. Whoops. Anyway, as we're discussing our game plan, Pippin notices the orb sitting in the water. He goes over and picks it up, and immediately Gandalf is like, bro, do not touch that, give it to me. So Pippin does, and Gandalf like wraps it in cloth and hides it away. Very suspicious. So departing from Isengard, Merry and Pippin are now officially part of this group. We're leaving Treebeard behind to probably build a Walmart, and because he's building a Walmart, we're gonna take him off the board. He's not dead though. Bye, Treebeard. Shit. So, sticking with this new group, we all leave Isengard and go back to Edoras, which is the capital of Rohan, where we're having a party to honor everyone who died at the Battle of Helm's Deep, which is not on the map because we're not going there, but it's right here. At this party, Legolas and Gimli play a drinking game that is just not at all a drinking game. It's just like go shot for shot until one of you can't do it anymore. Except they do it with like ale, which just seems like a lot of liquid. I feel like just play quarters, it's more fun, but whatever. Legolas wins. Also at the party, Pippin is acting kind of weird, but we ignore it. And I don't know if it's just the lighting in this scene, but everyone's eyes are way too blue. It freaks me out. Back with Team Ring. Frodo and Sam are asleep, and Gollum is talking to himself. Classic situation. As you may remember, at the end of the last movie, his Smeagol side and his Gollum side agreed to team up to conspire against the hobbits. So his current self-conversation is about that. The general plan is, hey, we're already acting as the hobbits' guide. What if we just guide them to some place that's gonna kill them? Which, honestly, that's a pretty airtight plan. They've put 100% of the navigation on Gollum. They're obviously going to go wherever he takes them. This is why you have to double check the map. I've seen the Blair Witch Project like at least 40 times. You have to check the map. I'd say 80% of that movie is arguing about the map. The major flaw in Gollum's plan though is that he's saying it all out loud, which is liable to get a bitch caught. Sam wakes up and hears Gollum saying that he's going to feed the hobbits to her, spooky. So Sam attacks him, but then Frodo gets up and stops Sam. And he's like, I don't think Gollum is evil, but even if he is, we don't have a choice. We're totally lost without him because again, we put 100% of the navigation on him. Double check the map. Over with everyone else, we're in Edoras, which means Eowyn is actually with us now because that's where she was waiting for us. And we're all sleeping in the palace. Aragorn gets up and goes outside to stare stoically into the middle distance. And he runs into Legolas, who was already outside staring stoically into the middle distance. Fellas, is it gay to stare stoically into the middle distance with your bro? Legolas is like, my magical heightened elf senses are telling me that our situation is bad, which like, yeah, I feel that I could have gathered that with my normal senses, but okay. Inside, Pippin is tossing and turning, can't sleep, could not be me. I sleep so much all the time, even when I don't want to, sitting upright in a chair often. He wants to look at the all-purpose orb again. It's like the only thing he's thinking about. And he gets up to go do that, which means it's finally time to explain the all-purpose orb. So the orb is a thing called a Palantér. I'm always inclined to pronounce it Palantir, because there's an accent on this I. But in the movie, Gandalf says Palantir, so I guess we're going with that. The Palantir is a seeing stone. So it is like a standard crystal ball. But the original purpose of them wasn't like scrying or seeing the future or whatever. It was just communicating between different Palantirs. Big, round walkie-talkie. There were originally 7 of them in Middle-earth. The Palantiri, plural, were scattered across the collective area of Gondor and Arnor, and they were all in towers in various important cities so that those cities could communicate with each other. Over time, several of the Palantiri have been destroyed, mostly by assorted wars. There are 4 left. One of those is irrelevant to us, and another one is technically here, but we don't ever mention it in the movie. movie. So for our purposes, there are two. Saruman had one in Isengard, which is the one that we have now, and Sauron has one over in Mordor. They've been using them to communicate evil plans back and forth. And Gandalf thinks that this Palantér connection is how Saruman was corrupted to the dark side. Count Dooku and Saruman do have the exact same arc, don't they? Rest in peace to Sir Christopher Lee, by the way, who died at age 93 with 244 screen credits, 17 movie sword fights, which I think is still the world record, 5 fluent and 4 proficient languages, several musical credits in films for opera, and 2 full heavy metal albums released at ages 88 and 91 to his name. He read Lord of the Rings once a year, every year since it came out in 1954. He actually met Professor Tolkien once, and on the set of this movie, Peter Jackson was blocking the scene where Grima stabs Saruman, and Sir Christopher Lee corrected him on some details because he had hunted Nazis in World War II and knew firsthand what it sounds like when someone gets stabbed in the back. Absolutely batshit crazy. That's my Dracula right there, dude. Holy shit. Anyway, the Palantér. They can communicate between each other, which is how Saruman got mega influenced by Sauron. He used to be normal good wizard, now he is abnormal bad wizard, except actually now he is dead wizard. A Palantér can't exactly like look into your thoughts or anything by itself, but because it's basically a walkie-talkie, anything that the user can do can still happen. So like, because Sauron is able to influence people very drastically, he can still do that through the Palantér. So we're in the palace in Edoras and it's the middle of the night. Pippin gets up because he's very curious and wants to look at the Palantér again. So he takes it from Gandalf, who's still sleeping, by doing the Indiana Jones switcheroo. That's a technical term. When he touches it though, he immediately starts getting a bunch of spooky visions of Sauron and reacting like he's in a lot of pain. Everything goes crazy mode for a second until everybody else wakes up and Gandalf covers the Palantér again. Pippin, meanwhile, is freaking out and Gandalf is like, what happened? What did you see in the orb? And Pippin says that he saw Sauron and it was very upsetting. And he also saw Minas Tirith, which is the capital city of Gondor, burning. Not great. Here's what's interesting though. Gandalf asks if Pippin told Sauron anything about Frodo, and he didn't. But he did see Minas Tirith. So actually, this whole shit with the Palantér is turning out to be a good thing, because what Pippin saw was a glimpse of Sauron's plan. We had originally intended to get that information by interrogating Saruman, but obviously we weren't able to do that. Which reminds me that these two are not supposed to be on the board anymore because they died. Bye. Anyway, we were kind of SOL on that until right now, when we have learned via Pippin and the Palantér that Sauron plans to strike Minas Tirith. Now remember, Minas Tirith is the capital of Gondor, and it's where the king of Gondor would live if there was one, which there isn't. However, we do know that the rightful heir to the throne of Gondor is alive because it's Aragorn. By the way, various characters refer to him as the heir of Elendil. Elendil was just the first king of Gondor. He was the father of Isildur. So because Aragorn is related to Isildur, he's also related to Elendil. So if you hear somebody refer to him as the heir of Elendil, they just mean that he's the heir to the throne of Gondor. The point of this is that because of the defeat at Helm's Deep, Sauron now knows that the heir of Elendil is alive, which means that men are not as weak as he thought. However, he doesn't know who the heir is or where they are. It's Aragorn, he's with us. But so Sauron's plan is now centered on destroying Gondor before the return of the king. I said the name. So we extrapolate all of this regarding Sauron's plan based on what Pippin saw in the Palantér. We're standing around talking about it in Edoras, and Gandalf is like, hey Theoden, Rohan is gonna have to help Gondor, so your horse girls need to mobilize. And Theoden is like, no. Why should we help Gondor? We were in fucking dire straits at Helm's Deep and they didn't do anything to help us. Which is true, but a battle in Minas Tirith would mean something very different than the battle at Helm's Deep. Minas Tirith is the biggest and most powerful city that mankind has. For Minas Tirith to fall would essentially mean the end of Gondor, which would very quickly lead to the end of Rohan. So the issue here is no longer honoring alliances between kingdoms. Now it's like, does mankind continue to exist or not? Regardless, Theoden says that Rohan is not going to mobilize at this moment. The implication is that if Gondor formally asks for help, then the horse girls will be there. In the book by this point, Gondor has actually already done that. They've asked for help by now and Rohan is already gathering troops. But in the movie, we're not doing that. So Gandalf is like, okay, restructuring the plan. Someone has to warn Gondor, but it can't be the besties three because Aragorn is with them and he's kind of an ace up our sleeve at the moment. So I'm gonna go and I'm taking Pippin with me. Pippin, meanwhile, doesn't really get what's going on. So Merry has to be like, okay, dumb fuck, and explain everything. But all he says is you have to leave because the enemy thinks that you have the ring, which honestly isn't super helpful because he then doesn't explain why the enemy would think that or why going to Minas Tirith would help with that at all. So regarding why Sauron would think that Pippin has the ring, ring, Sauron thinks that Saruman is still in control of the Isengard Palantér, because he has no reason to assume otherwise. In the movie, Saruman is dead, but how would he know that? And in the book, Saruman is alive, but Grima tossed the Palantér out of the tower to be an asshole, which again, how would he know that? So Sauron thinks that Saruman still has the Palantér, and he knew that Saruman was trying to find the ring, because that was the mission that Sauron sent Saruman on. He also knew that it was probably to eventually betray him, but that doesn't really matter. The important part is that both Saruman and Sauron knew that a hobbit had the ring, because in the first movie, Gandalf had told Saruman that the ring was in the Shire when he went to Isengard to ask for advice before he knew that Saruman was evil. So when Sauron sees Pippin through the Palantér, which is supposed to be in Isengard, he's like, oh, Saruman must have captured the hobbit that has the ring. So more or less, that's why Sauron thinks that Pippin has the ring. Regarding why Gandalf is taking Pippin to Minas Tirith, mostly to keep an eye on him, he gets into stuff. Also, this way he can protect him from any Nazgul that might seek him out. I just realized that the Nazgul are not up on the board. We're doing so well today. Nazgul. Regardless, Gandalf and Pippin are going to Minas Tirith, which is truly brutal for Billy Boyd, the actor who plays Pippin, because my man is Scottish.
How far is Minas Tirith?
Minas Tirith. So these two split off, and we're back to having 3 separate groups to keep track of, plus irrelevant elves and villains. Now, we have to do a brief interlude for the fucking Rivendell elves again. Arwen is in the process of traveling to the coast so that she can get on a boat to go to Valinor. She has a weird and inexplicable vision of her son that she, I guess, has with Aragorn. So she says, fuck this, I want to have my son, and she turns around and goes back to Rivendell. By doing that, she has officially made the choice to stay on Middle-earth and become mortal. Remember, in the book, she made this same choice like 40 years ago or more. And so she goes to her father Elrond and she's like, hey, I'm mortal now. Also, she's still crying. Thank you so much. Anyway, Elrond is like, well, fuck, now I guess I have a vested interest in the fate of Middle-earth, because if everything goes to shit, it'll mean a horrible death for my now mortal daughter. So I guess I'm gonna help Aragorn win the war against Sauron, and I'm gonna do that by reforging the sword that Isildur's dad used to kill Sauron the first time, like 3,000 years ago when we first got the ring. Symbolism. I do feel like Elrond probably should have had a vested interest in Middle-earth anyway. He's lived here for like many thousands of years. You don't have any like fondness or nostalgia that would make you want to potentially save this place? Anyway, let's go hang out with Gandalf and Pippin. After 3 days of traveling by Warrior Cat's horse, they get to Minas Tirith, which looks incredibly hard to navigate. What kind of city planning is that? What the hell happens when it rains? Just fuck the bottom layers in particular? This is all just flooded? Anyway, we get all the way to the Citadel at the top, which I'd imagine takes at least another day in this wedding cake ass city. We're in the Citadel to see the guy in charge of Gondor, whose name is Denethor. However, as we know, Gondor has no king, so Denethor is instead the steward of Gondor. He's like in charge of it in the absence of a king, except we haven't had a king for like 1,000 years. The stewards have reigned for a long time, essentially. Denethor is also the father of Faramir, which makes him also the father of Boromir, who, as you may recall, is dead. Boromir was the older son and by far the favorite. Denethor fucking hates Faramir for a pretty classic reason. His wife died due to complications of giving birth to Faramir, so Denethor blames Faramir for her death. Standard setup. He also just thinks that Faramir has like always been weak and shit. Despite the situation with their father, Boromir and Faramir were always very close. Anyway, Boromir is of course dead, but we don't know if Denethor knows that. So Gandalf's like, Pippin, don't say anything about the fact that Boromir is dead. We walk into the throne room and Gandalf is like, hey Denethor, and Denethor's like, why is Boromir dead? Okay. Pippin is like, well, he already knows. Time to throw the whole plan out. And he tells Denethor that Boromir died protecting him and Merry. And then out of nowhere, he's like, but I'll pledge my service to Gondor in repayment of my debt to Boromir. Gandalf decides to deal with that later. Can't blame him. And tries to go for diplomacy. He's like, okay, Denethor, unfortunately, we do kind of really need you to lock in. You have an existential threat coming your way, and you kind of have no choice but to fight it out. Having the horse girls here would be a huge help for that, so you should formally request Theoden's help. And Denethor goes, listen, you fuck-ass glass cannon motherfucker, I'm not stupid. I know that you've been hanging out with Theoden, and I know that Aragorn exists. You're trying to use my city as a war stronghold, and you're trying to usurp my throne. And Gandalf is like, okay, 2 things. 1, your city's gonna end up being a war stronghold no matter what. And 2, what do you mean usurp your throne? You don't have the throne. You're not the king. And Denethor is like, fuck you, yes I am. So we find out that Denethor has let the power that he has as the steward of Gondor like really go to his head. And also that he won't move to defend the city or to call for Theoden's help. Separately, Pippin actually did pledge his service to Denethor, so he gets like sworn in as a guard of the Citadel. Employment? That's huge. Later, Gandalf and Pippin are talking and Gandalf hard launches the concept of the Witch King of Angmar. The Witch King is one of the 9 Nazgul. He's like the leader Nazgul because he's the most powerful one. There's a long-standing prophecy that like no living man can kill him. Pretty classic. He's actually the one that lightly stabbed Frodo that one time in the first movie. And he lives in this place called Minas Morgul. So let's talk about the deal with this place. Minas Morgul was originally a city of Gondor. Back then it was called Minas Ithil, and it was the easternmost city in the kingdom, located right at the opening of the pass that goes between Gondor and Mordor. You know how Frodo and Sam have been looking for a way into Mordor other than the Black Gate? It'll be this pass, but we'll get here later. So Minas Ithil was there to be a defense against Mordor, and as beautiful as it allegedly was, I'm sure it sucked to live there. Place got sieged several times. The most recent time it got sieged was by the Nazgul like 1,000 years ago, at which point it was completely overtaken and occupied by Sauron's forces from Mordor. Now it's called Minas Morgul and is still controlled by Sauron and associated evil guys. Regarding the name, Minas Ithil, which was the Gondor version of the name, means Tower of the Moon, and Minas Morgul means like Tower of Dark Sorcery. Very subtle, but to clarify, Minas Morgul is a name that men gave to the fallen version of the city. They renamed it after it was lost. Mordor has their own name for it. Minas Tirith also used to have a different name. It's a whole thing and it doesn't really matter. But just know that Minas Morgul and Minas Ithil are the same place. If you hear either name, they're both this one city. So Gandalf tells Pippin about the Witch King of Angmar, who lives in Minas Morgul and has lived in Minas Morgul since he sieged it 1,000 years ago. We then cut from this group to Team Ring, who is currently arriving in Minas Morgul. Timing works out. Upon their arrival, we see that the Witch King has made the place spooky creepy to match his aesthetic. And I am all for exterior design. It's very cohesive. As we're standing here, we see that there's a giant army of orcs in Minas Morgul that are doing like Avengers gearing up montage shit. So now this group knows that there is for sure a war going on. Also, the Witch King makes his very dramatic debut on his fell beast. We have been referring to fell beasts as Alaskan bull wyverns. We are going to continue to do that. Anyway, making it to Minas Morgul means that we've also made it to that pass that's right next to it. There are technically 2 routes through this pass. One of them is way easier, but puts us out in the open. So instead, we're going to take the other one, which is difficult and sucks. The pass, by the way, is called Tirith Ungol. I've marked it right here. I'm sure you can't really make out this photo at all. That's going to be a running theme, by the way. Everything from these mountains eastward is going to be really poorly lit, okay? Anyway, the pass is here. Tirith Ungol means passage of the spider. Surely this is innocuous and foreshadows nothing. Anyway, Gollum starts taking us up this truly evil staircase that is the first part of Tirith Ungol. While they're doing that, we're going to go visit Faramir, who I wish I hadn't put over here, because while he is associated with this group for the majority of the movie, he is not in Minas Tirith where the rest of them are. I'm going to label where everyone is, actually. One second. I've given Isildur brackets so that you know that he's a person. Anyway, we're visiting Faramir. He and his men are stationed here in Osgiliath, which is the place where we were at when he let Frodo and Sam go. Also, we have encountered yet another crucial technical difficulty. We are out of red friendship bracelet string, so now anything vaguely resembling red also counts. And for the record, red is places that belong to our team, black is places that belong to Sauron team. Checkers rules. Anyway, Osgiliath used to be the capital of Gondor. Currently, the capital is Minas Tirith, but it used to be Osgiliath. After several thousand years and various wars and plagues, though, Osgiliath now lies in ruins and is abandoned. Now, here's the thing about Osgiliath. It was built on both sides of the river Anduin. Like, there was an eastern side of the city, a huge bridge over the river, and then the western side of the city, but both were Osgiliath. And then there's like a big field in here, and then there's Minas Tirith. Originally, Minas Ithil, which is now Minas Morgul, was placed where it was to defend against Mordor, but that stopped being viable after a while when it was sieged like a billion times. So eventually, Osgiliath became the last line of defense between Mordor and Minas Tirith. In order to get to Minas Tirith, forces from Mordor would have to cross the river. Now, like we said, there's basically 2 halves of Osgiliath. It's like eastern half, the big bridge, and then western half. There's also a bunch of small bridges, but there's one like big main bridge. That bridge is the most viable point to get a full-scale army from Mordor across this river, which is one of the reasons why Osgiliath is now in ruins. It gets attacked all the time, like every time the orcs need to cross the river. River crossings are a big deal in Middle-earth warfare. Anyway, Faramir and his men are stationed in the western side of Osgiliath. Only the western side. They can't get to the eastern side anymore because they have purposely destroyed all of their own bridges to try to stop the orcs from crossing the river. So now there's essentially no way for a large-scale army to get across this river on foot. But still, even if they can't do it on foot by bridge, because of what infrastructure has remained in place, like docks and boat landings and roads, Osgiliath is basically still the only place where a large army could feasibly cross the river at all. all. The orcs have already taken the eastern part of Osgiliath. That's why our team destroyed the bridges. All this to say, if Sauron's army is able to take the western side of Osgiliath, they'll have completely free passage to get across the river, and there will be nothing standing between them and Minas Tirith anymore. Got it? So Faramir and his men are garrisoned here, holding the western side of Osgiliath, which has been going about as fine as it can so far. Except actually there are suddenly like 100 orc boats coming across the river. So fuck us, I guess. And even better, we have guessed wrong about where we thought they'd be coming from. So now we have like 2 minutes to change our entire formation and get ready to fight, after which the orcs make landfall very Normandy style, and the numbers game looks very bad for us, I can't lie. Meanwhile, in Minas Tirith, Denethor is like not doing anything. He's pretty despairing too. Like he's like, oh, I don't think there's a point in defending the city because we're all gonna die anyway, blah, blah, blah. He's not despairing nearly this much in the book at this point, but we're in the movie, and in the movie he's like, bro, it's so over. So Gandalf is like, okay, more plan restructuring. And he secretly sends Pippin to go light the beacons of Minas Tirith, which is a big signal fire setup that Minas Tirith lights if Gondor needs help. There's a bunch of them in a line across these mountains here in like 30-mile increments, and they're all monitored 24/7. If the beacon in Minas Tirith goes up, you're able to see it from the next beacon. So you light that one, and the next one sees it, and you go down the line until you get to the beacon that's visible from Edoras. If the beacons of Minas Tirith are lit, Gondor is calling on Rohan for help in a wartime conflict. This would be that formal request for aid that Theoden wanted. Denethor clearly won't make the request himself, so Gandalf sends Pippin to do it. The beacons all like sequentially lighting up is such a cool scene, dude. Notably in the books, Denethor again is not in total despair at the moment, so there he does light the beacons himself, and actually he did so a while ago. But anyway, the final beacon in the chain is lit, and all the way in Edoras, Aragorn sees it. So he runs to the palace and he's like, dude, the beacons are lit, Gondor's calling for help. And Theoden goes,
and Rohan will answer.
Theoden gives the order to assemble the horse girls. He gives his generals 2 days to run around the kingdom and gather every man who can wield a sword. All the horse girls are going to meet up in a war encampment, and then we'll ride out for Minas Tirith the following morning. Right after that order, Merry pops up and he's like, hey, I have a sword. And Theoden's like, yeah, okay. So Merry is now a horse girl. Actually, he has a pony, but proportionally he's a horse girl. As everyone is prepping to go to the war encampment, we see that Eowyn is tacking up a horse. And Aragorn walks by and he's like, oh, are you coming with us? And she's like, haha, yeah, it's tradition for women of the court to like go to the war encampment or whatever. And Aragorn is like, oh, okay. Hey, is there a reason you're bringing like a poorly concealed sword with you? And Eowyn's like, I wouldn't worry about it. Meanwhile, over in Osgiliath with Faramir, everyone is fucked. Like, it is so over. Nothing has ever been more over. Orcs and Nazgul and Alaskan bull wyverns have completely overrun the western half of the city, and most of the Gondorian garrison is dead. Granted, this was never a winnable fight. We were unprepared and severely outnumbered. So Faramir orders a retreat to Minas Tirith. When we get there, Faramir finds Gandalf, who he knows already. He's the son of an important figure, and Gandalf travels a lot. Faramir sees Pippin, and he's like, what the fuck? Another hobbit. He's probably seen more hobbits in the last week than he has in the entire rest of his life combined. So he makes the connection and he tells Gandalf and Pippin about his interactions with Frodo and Sam. Which is good because now at least somebody from the other teams actually knows that they're alive and that the ring is still on the move. However, Faramir also says that they're going via Cirith Ungol, and Gandalf is like, rest in peace, I guess. Later, Faramir meets with his father and tells him about what's been going on. And Denethor is like, bro, why did you send the ring away with Frodo? You should have given it to me. You suck so bad, dude. Boromir would have given it to me. And Faramir is like, no, he wouldn't have. It would have corrupted him and he would have used it for himself. Which, like, yeah, he's totally right. But that doesn't really matter to Denethor, who is more fucked up than we thought. We kind of thought he was just like despairing and grieving and being a shut-in, but as it turns out, he's full fucked up. He's like hallucinating Boromir and shit. Also, the actor for Denethor, his name's John Noble, is fantastic. Unironically, this is by far the most unsettling character in the whole series. I am more scared of this guy than I am of anything else in the movies or in the books. I actually had nightmares of this guy as a child. Him and Herbert from Club Penguin, who kind of looks like him, now that I think about it. Over with Frodo and Sam, we have started climbing the 10 billion stairs of Cirith Ungol. These aren't really stairs, actually. If you have to boulder in order to use them, they're not stairs. Fuck that. Anyway, Sam is on to Gollum. He can tell that there's some nefarious plot going on, and he's mad about it. To get ahead of it, Gollum flips it and starts telling Frodo that Sam wants the ring and is gonna try to steal it from him. And Frodo starts getting suspicious of Sam. We said this in the last video, but again, in the book, Frodo is never suspicious of Sam, and they're besties all the way through. Immediately going back to Faramir. We're in the Citadel speaking to Denethor again. Pippin is also here now because he works here. He's employed. Denethor tells Faramir that he should go try to take Osgiliath back. Faramir says no, that's a suicide mission, and anyway it wouldn't help at this point. The orcs have already crossed the river. To which Denethor says, I wish you had died instead of Boromir. Jesus. So Faramir, who is really beaten down and is trying to win his father's approval, is like, okay, I guess I'm going to Osgiliath. In the unlikely event that I survive, please think higher of me. Notably, in the book at this point, the conditions surrounding Osgiliath are different, and the decision to try to take it back makes a lot more sense there. At this point in the book, the beacons have already been lit, but Gondor is still holding the eastern side of Osgiliath. The orcs have not crossed the river. Denethor wants to send Faramir to Osgiliath to try to hold the western side for as long as they can. The hope is that they can buy Rohan enough time to gather their forces and get here, hopefully before the orcs do. It's still a suicide mission, but it's a much more strategically reasonable play than what happens in the movie. But also, the movie is purposely portraying Denethor as crazier than he is in the book at this same juncture, and having him send his son to Osgiliath under the movie's circumstances does definitely boost the sense that he's crazy, like a lot. However, it also boosts the sense that Faramir is really desperate for his father's approval, which is still the case in the book, but it's not this bad. It's not to the point that he would send his own men to certain death for no good reason. Anyway, Faramir and his men ride back to Osgiliath. Over with Team Ring, Gollum is going eviler mode. While the others are asleep, he throws the last of their food off of the cliff stairs, and then sprinkles some of the crumbs on Sam. So Gollum frames Sam for the murder of their lembas bread, and everyone is confused and mad and so on. And then Frodo is like having an extra bad time because of the ring, and Sam, trying to be nice, is like, hey, I could carry it for a bit if you need, but Frodo takes that as confirmation of what Gollum said earlier, that Sam is gonna try to steal the ring from him. So he tells Sam to leave and go home, like go back to the Shire, as if that's at all viable from the bouldering stairs. But eventually Sam says okay and leaves. Finally checking in with our besties and horse girls, people are starting to gather at the war encampment, which is located here over by Edoras. It's like a few mountains over. At the moment, we have gathered about 6,000 men, which is less than half of what we'd hoped for, and also definitely not enough. In the war encampment, Legolas and Gimli are speaking to Éomer, and they're like, hey, we found this ominous path that cuts through the mountains. Do you know what that is? And Éomer is like, oh, that's the road to the spooky door under the mountain. None who venture there ever return, haha. Naturally, when Aragorn looks at that same path, he sees a ghost. So later that night, Theoden calls Aragorn to the fancy king tent and says, hey, someone is here to see you. It's fucking Elrond, who rode here with a hood covering his eyes, it looks like. Very dangerous. Elrond tells Aragorn that Arwen has chosen mortality, so now he gives a shit about the war. And he gives us a couple pieces of information. First of all, he says Sauron has his army marching on Minas Tirith, which we knew already, but apparently there's also a second secret army of pirates that are going to be invading simultaneously from the river. He says they'll be here in 2 days, and like, Elrond, dude, how long have you known this? Couldn't you have appeared in a dream or something to tell us? Or you could tell Arwen and then she could appear in a dream and tell us? She's always doing that anyway. We could just make it cool and helpful for once. Elrond also tells Aragorn that he needs more men, and Aragorn is like, yeah, I know, but there are no more men. And Elrond says, there are those in the mountain. He's referring to that road that leads to the spooky door that Éomer told us about, because apparently the ghost that Aragorn saw was real, and there are ghost men in the mountain. Elrond gives Aragorn the reforged version of the sword that Elendil used to defeat Sauron the first time, which is largely symbolic, but also the sword is kind of magical, I don't know. It basically serves as like proof that Aragorn really is the heir of Elendil, because apparently only this bloodline can wield the sword. Elrond says that the man who can wield Excalibur sword thing can summon and control the ghost army. So Aragorn is gonna head out to go collect the ghost army. And he's about to go when Ride or Die's Legolas and Gimli pull up and they're like, actually, we're coming with you. Besties 3 hanging out on a quest. We're getting the band back together. So we've reshuffled again. These 3 are going to Ghost Mountain. These 4 are still in the war encampment. Elrond has gone back to Rivendell, I think. I don't know. So Ghost Zone is obviously in the same place as the war encampment. That's how we get there. So we've just attached these 2 together. This is labeled Ghost Cave, but the Ghost Cave is inside the Ghost Mountain. We're not technically here yet, but it's fine. Legolas explains what's going on with Ghost Mountain pretty clearly, but the gist of it is a long time ago there was a big-ass army that swore an oath to Isildur to help Gondor fight against Sauron, but when the time came, the army did not do that. As a result, they are cursed to stay on Middle-earth until they fulfill their oath. So I guess Isildur has like curse-causing abilities, like real ones, because these guys actually did become ghosts. The wording of the oath stipulates that the army has to obey anybody who is actually an heir of Isildur, and also only an heir of Isildur can declare that the oath has been fulfilled. So basically there's a big ghost army in Ghost Mountain, and Aragorn is, in theory, the only person that they'll actually answer to. So the besties 3 go inside Ghost Mountain, now they're in Ghost Cave, where they hope to find ghosts. Seems doable. The following morning, the horse girls head out. It's gonna take them all day and night to ride to Minas Tirith. Merry is all geared up on his pony, and Theoden rides by and is like, dude, you can't come with us. You're too small and the pony is too slow and none of my riders can afford to take you with them. Which, like, Why did you tell him he could be in the fight earlier then? Regardless, everyone goes and Merry's getting left behind. But then Eowyn pulls up in disguise. She's wearing a helmet that hides her face. She rides by, grabs Merry, pulls him up onto the horse and says, "Ride with me." Exactly. Yes, we do, girl. Merry and Eowyn are going to Minas Tirith. Over in Ghost Mountain, we find ghosts. A lot of them. We meet their spokes ghost, the King of the Dead, and Aragorn is like, "You need to help us fight a war." Ghost guy says, "Well, we'll only do that if the heir of Isildur asks us to." Aragorn's like, "Bitch, I know what I said." So we promise the ghosts that we'll declare their oath fulfilled if they help us fight this battle. The whole Ghost Mountain and cave collapses for kind of no reason, and there's a second where we're like, oh fuck, they're not gonna help us. But then Ghost King is like, actually, yeah, let's do it. And elsewhere, we see that the orcs are in the middle of their march towards Minas Tirith. So the pieces are in place. We will discuss the rest tomorrow. It's tomorrow. So in the middle of their march, Sauron's orc army have made it past Osgiliath. Now, crucially important, the orc army has siege weapons. That's important because I love siege weapons. Dude, my Northern Realms Gwent deck is like entirely siege units. It's the anti-monsters deck. That's the strat. Siege units and biting frosts. Anyway, the orc army is advancing on Minas Tirith, but they have to cross this big field, so they're not quite here yet. In the meantime, one singular horse pulls up to the gates of Minas Tirith, which is confusing, and the guards open the gate, which is even more confusing. Guys, I thought we were clear. Never open the city gates for a singular horse under suspicious circumstances. We've been over this. It ends up being okay though, because as it turns out, it's Faramir's horse. And also Faramir, who's like full of arrows and attached to the horse via reins looped around his leg. So presumably he's been dragged all the way here behind the horse, and I feel like that alone probably should have killed him. Regardless, he has technically made it back to Minas Tirith. They have this dude moving all over the place. We don't know if he's dead. He looks pretty dead though. Regardless, he is evidently the only person that made it back from Osgiliath in any capacity. So the guards put him on a stretcher and bring him up to the citadel, where Denethor is for some reason shocked by this outcome. While that's happening, the orc army arrives at the gates of Minas Tirith, and one of their generals is like, okay, for our first move, we will catapult the severed heads of the men from the Osgiliath garrison over the wall and into the city. And that's obviously fucked up, but unfortunately, I am gagged. The orcs do teach a masterclass in lowering opponent morale. Back up in the citadel, Denethor is having like a full breakdown. He's like, bro, all is lost. Both of my sons are dead. This is so fucked. Meanwhile, Pippin actually checks on Faramir for more than half a second and realizes that he is in fact not dead, and we should perhaps help him because of that. But Denethor is full on despairing and is completely ignoring him. He's like, Rohan deserted us, my kids are dead, there's a fuck off big army at the gate. It's not going well. He starts yelling for soldiers to abandon their posts, so Gandalf fucking clubs him, knocks him out, and is like, ignore that. Prepare for battle. While they're preparing for battle, we find out that while the orcs have traditional mangonel catapults, Gondor has trebuchets, which for heavy siege purposes are obviously superior. Longer range, higher weight capacity, this is huge for us. We are flinging broken chunks of our own buildings back at the orc army. Admittedly not quite as iconic as the severed heads, but still pretty good. Some other highlights here. The Witch King and the other Nazgul pull up with their Alaskan bull wyverns. Gandalf is Donatelloing. Pippin stabs a guy. Lot going on. Over with the Besties 3, who are now outside of Ghost Mountain. Remember how Elrond told us that there was a second secret army of pirates? We are standing on a chill riverbank watching those pirate ships come in. Technically they're not pirates, they're corsairs, which makes them privateers. They're government authorized, significantly less cool. Although it occurs to me that the word corsair does have like a religious connotation, so Crusader privateers, I guess. The worst of both worlds. When the boats get close enough, Aragorn flags them down, and he's like, hey, sorry, you actually can't invade Gondor. And the Corsairs are like, right, so the thing is, we're gonna go ahead and invade Gondor anyway. So we summon the Ghost Army, who do a sick dramatic entrance and fucking decimate the Corsairs. And then we commandeer one of the boats and keep sailing towards where the pirates were gonna land. Corsairs? Where the Corsairs were gonna land. Over in Minas Tirith, the orcs are having a hard time with the city gates, so they have to deploy their giant on-fire battering ram, which is named Grond. Grond is giving Flamethrower double guitar guy from Mad Max Fury Road, and I'm a huge fan of Flamethrower double guitar guy from Mad Max Fury Road, which makes me a fan of Grond by association. Anyway, with the power vested in Grond, the orcs are able to break through the gate. Sauron's forces officially inside Minas Tirith. Meanwhile, Pippin is up in the Citadel, where we see that Denethor is about to have a funeral for Faramir, who again is not dead. Still, Denethor is like, okay, yeah, all is lost. Time to go ahead and burn my son and also myself on a pyre, despite the fact that we are both alive. This will definitely be a righteous end for my bloodline. Sure, why not? Let's check in with Frodo and Gollum. Sam is leaving them, but he's not going to Osgiliath, and neither is anybody else for the rest of the movie, so we're getting rid of it. So, checking in on Frodo and Gollum. They're in the middle of Cirith Ungol, and they have arrived at a spooky, very winding cave. Gollum leads Frodo inside the cave and then disappears. And Frodo is calling for him and being like, huh, this is so crazy. Why are there so many people bones all over the floor? Meanwhile, Sam, who has been sent away, gets all the way to the bottom of the bouldering stairs, only to find the bread that Gollum threw over the edge of the cliff. So Sam sees that and he's like, okay, so I'm right. Gollum is planning something nefarious. And he turns around and starts climbing back up the stairs. Have you seen these fucking stairs? I live on the 6th floor of a building with no elevator. If I go down the stairs and realize I've left something in my apartment, there is a nothing % chance that I'm going back for that thing, even if it's my roommate. This motherfucker is on the bouldering stairs and is going back for Frodo, who was a dick to him. Ride or die of the universe, truly. While Sam is climbing again, Frodo is running around trying to escape this cave. It's really dark in here, but he remembers that way back in Lothlorien in the first movie, he was given a thing called the Phial of Galadriel. It's basically just a little glass container that emits light and also allegedly makes you feel more hopeful, but for our purposes it's a flashlight. So he deploys the magic flashlight and sees a big ass spider monster. The spider does have a name. Its name is Shelob. We're gonna call it Evil Spider. Frodo tries to run away from Evil Spider, pretty fair, and he actually does escape the cave, but then Gollum pops up, I guess he's been here the whole time, and attacks him to try to get the ring. Frodo's response to that is to toss him off a cliff. So other than off the cliff, we don't really know where he is anymore. So Frodo is now wandering around by himself trying to find a way through Cirith Ungol. However, the spider is also wandering around. And eventually it finds Frodo and stings him. And as it turns out, the sting is paralytic. So now Frodo is paralyzed and gets all wrapped up in evil spider webs and shit. The spider is about to eat him, but then Sam, apparently having navigated the cave with no issues, appears and stabs the spider and it runs away to who knows where. And then he goes to get Frodo, but he sees him and he's like, all right, this man is super dead. Which is a pretty fair conclusion to come to. Also, Sam is crying this whole time, not just when he thinks Frodo is dead, like also during the spider fight and shit. He's a very gentle person and he's terrified of everything that he's doing, but he's doing it anyway because he cares so much about his friend. So note how this is a character crying and it actually contributes to his arc, right? This whole thing sucks and it's ugly and painful and he's still here. In this moment, we learn more about who Sam is because Sam is also learning more about who he is. Now compare this to our other character that does a lot of crying, Arwen. Imagine if Arwen was allowed the same depth and personhood and agency. Like imagine if she was a real character who had literally any definable personality traits and who isn't crying exclusively to make her more of a broken bird. I have a question for men who write female characters like this. Is it not embarrassing to put this out there? Like you're admitting that you've never had an actual conversation with a woman. Anyway, Sam thinks that Frodo is dead and he's being sad about it, which is fair. And here I do have to remind you that Sean Astin is an incredible actor, holy shit. But then Sam hears some orcs approaching. He needs to hide, but he doesn't have time to hide with Frodo. And anyway, he thinks Frodo is dead, so he hides by himself. But then the orcs appear and they're like, oh look, the spider paralyzed some idiot so they can eat him alive without any resistance. Nice of them to give that exposition. They decide that Frodo probably has some valuables on him, so they grab him and take him back to wherever they came from. However, by now Sam has overheard the exposition and is like, ah fuck, I should have realized he's alive. Well, time to go break him out of orc jail, I guess. So Sam's on his way to go do that. Back in the Citadel in Minas Tirith, Denethor is setting up Faramir on an unlit pyre. And Faramir, for the record, is like pretty obviously alive at this point. Like he's unconscious, but he's making noise and moving a bit and everything. And out loud, Denethor is like, wow, it's so crazy that his skin is still warm. Oh well. Pippin comes in and he's like, dude, he's not dead. You need to stop the funeral. And in response, Denethor grabs Pippin and throws him out of the room and says that he's now relieved of his duties of being a guard for the Citadel. Very brief employment for Pippin. So Pippin goes running through the city to find Gandalf to ask for help. Over with Gandalf, we're calling a retreat to the 2nd level of the city because the orcs have fully overtaken the 1st level. So I guess this is the purpose of the cake tier design. You do the Attack on Titan thing where you can like lose sections without losing the whole place. I don't know. Anyway, Pippin finds Gandalf and tells him about the Faramir funeral situation. So both of them get on the warrior cat's horse and head back up to the Citadel, where Denethor is pouring oil on himself and Faramir and the pyre and is giving the order to light it when Gandalf and Pippin burst into the room to stop him. For the record, they're in the room on the horse. Being on a horse indoors is for some reason so funny to me. Anyway, seeing that this is a wrench in his plan, Denethor grabs a torch from a guard and lights the pyre himself. Fucking crazy. So the warrior cat's horse runs in and we push both Denethor and Faramir off of the pyre. And then Denethor is like trying to kill Pippin, so Gandalf pushes him back onto the pyre. And then as Denethor is literally catching on fire, he looks over at Faramir and he's like, oh my god, wait, he is alive. But he's already like super on fire, so he runs out of the room and jumps off a cliff at the edge of the Citadel. So Denethor kills himself. Faramir is good. Now down on the field in front of Minas Tirith, the horse girls have finally made it to the fight. So we have rearranged the board to put the horse girls over here in Minas Tirith, although they're labeled as being on the battlefield. These 4 are still here just in the Citadel. And then we've also put the Nazgul and the Witch King in Minas Tirith on the battlefield because they're attacking with the orcs. So the horse girls make it to the fight and they assemble on a ridge to flank the orc army. Theoden gives a pre-battle pep talk that is so incredibly sick.
And the sun rises! Rise to ruin and the world's ending!
And we see Éowyn and Merry joining the war cry. It's kick-ass. So we call the charge, and this is notably a cavalry flanking an infantry from slight high ground on open terrain, which is to say that this is a massacre for at least the outer ranks of the orcs. Horse girl cavalry decimating. We're doing well driving the orcs towards the river, but then naturally in come the Olifants, or Mumakil. They're those 50-foot tall war elephants that are on Sauron's team. Unfortunately for us, the elephants are effectively cavalry 2.0. They're big enough to crush horses under their feet, and they have these giant spiky tusks, and some of them have a rope tied between the tusks so that they can just clothesline everything in their path. They're super cool, unfortunately. Notably, the elephants are also carrying people. Each one has a guy with reins that's driving the elephant. And then they also have a bunch of archers firing from a howdah on their back. So now we're fighting elephants. For some reason, the horse girl army are largely attacking the elephants themselves instead of the people driving the elephants, which seems like a dumb move. Like, Éomer does throw a spear and hit one of the drivers, and that works really well. The driver like falls off the side and pulls the reins that way, and then the elephant goes off course and crashes into another elephant. We should be doing more of that, but instead everybody is shooting single arrows at 50-foot tall elephants. Except for Éowyn and Merry, who are now operating their horse Voltron style. Merry has the reins and he steers them under the elephant's legs, and Éowyn has 2 swords that she's using to cut the elephant's Achilles tendons, which also seems to be working super well. These 2 are so cool. Eventually though, they do get knocked off their Voltron horse and separated, which is bad news. Near where Éowyn is, the Witch King swoops down on his Alaskan bull wyvern and grabs and throws Theoden, who ends up like crushed under his horse and super fucked up. The Witch King is gonna kill him, but Éowyn pulls up and she fucking hacks the head off the Alaskan bull wyvern in like 2 hits, which like, she's a tank, but also this looks pretty easy. Like, clearly the Alaskan bull wyverns could be a weak point. See, this is the opposite situation to the elephants. Here, everybody needs to be going after the mounts more. Anyway, bull wyvern is dead, which leaves Éowyn with the Witch King himself. The Witch King's weapon is an enormous spiked flail, which I gotta say is a bold choice. Like, I get it for the aesthetic, but a flail this heavy seems super impractical. It keeps getting like lodged in the ground and he has to waste time pulling it up and he has all these blind spots. The Witch King grabs Éowyn and he's like, "You're such a fool to fight me, dude. No man can kill me." Merry appears and stabs the Witch King enough to distract him, so lightly stabs. And Éowyn goes,
"I am no man."
Bro, helmet off, line delivered, prophecy technically fulfilled. Éowyn, cool as fuck, stabs the Witch King in the face, and he implodes and dies. Iconic. Over by the river, a group of orcs that the horse girls pushed over here is waiting for the corsairs to arrive. So when a boat pulls in, they're like, okay, finally, reinforcements, let's go. However, of course, on the boat, it's actually our besties 3, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and also the giant ghost army. And that is gonna go ahead and be Orlando Bloom on a pirate ship with a bunch of ghosts, foreshadowing 100. So the ghost army and the besties charge the battlefield. Let's get everything moved around again. So Minas Tirith has been moved over here. This group is still in the Citadel. Now there's this huge group on the battlefield, and the Witch King is coming off the board altogether because he is in fact dead, as you should. As it turns out, the ghost army is basically invincible, which does make sense, I guess. They're ghosts. Everything just goes through them. They're very useful. Also very useful is Aragorn's favorite tactical maneuver, which, as we know, is to say the word Legolas and have shit just get done. In this instance, I have no idea what he wanted Legolas to do, but Legolas interprets it as, please take down this entire 50-foot war elephant by yourself post-haste. So he does that. Do we even need the ghost army? I feel like we could have gotten away with like 10 to 20 more woodland elves. Why did we only bring 1? Over with Éowyn, she drags herself over to where Theoden is all fucked up, and he's like, whoa, could have sworn I told you to stay home. And she's like, yeah, you did. And then they're both like, Except also Theoden is like, hey, my whole shit is broken. Like, I'm dead. You know I'm dead. And Éowyn does what she can, but ultimately she does know that it's too late. And Theoden is like, I'm glad I'll die as myself and not as a puppet of Saruman. And I'm glad I'll die with honor, having overcome my cowardice. And then he dies. Whoop. Soon after, the battle for Minas Tirith concludes. In the aftermath of the battle, everyone is wandering around, reuniting and tallying the dead and so on. Aragorn makes good on his promise to free the ghost army. So their oath is now fulfilled and they disappear to, I guess, the afterlife. Whoop. Éomer finds Éowyn on the battlefield and he reacts like she's dead, but she's not. Everyone in movies and things needs to stop immediately lifting up injured people. PSA, if you ever find an injured person and you don't know what injuries they have, Please do not move them immediately unless you have no other choice. Check for spinal and neck injuries first, maybe? Movies paralyzing people left and right. Things here happen kind of out of order, but regardless, Éowyn ends up in the Minas Tirith Houses of Healing, which is the infirmary. Faramir also goes to the infirmary. I just realized Denethor is still on the board even though he's dead. 1 second, please. Whoop. And we're now removing the distinction between the citadel and the battlefield because we're no longer fighting a battle. Also, the Nazgul have retreated with what orcs remain to Mordor. And then Pippin goes looking for Merry and somehow actually finds him among like a million bodies in this giant space. Merry is not dead, so that's good. Overall, everyone on our side is fine and reunited except for Theoden, who's dead. I'm not counting Denethor as on our side. Now, over with Frodo. He's been kidnapped by orcs as spider food, but they actually haven't really removed him from Cirith Ungol. Instead, he's being held captive at an orc tower that marks just about the end of the pass. This tower where he's held captive is creatively named the Tower of Cirith Ungol. These two are both technically still in Cirith Ungol, but now they're slightly split up. We're being creative here. Anyway, we're in a loft in the orc tower, and Frodo is no longer paralyzed, so that's nice. But the orcs have taken all of his shit from him, which is less nice, especially because that includes the ring. So Frodo no longer has the ring, which I would argue is super not nice. On the other side of the loft, 2 orcs are rifling through Frodo's shit and start arguing over it, which of course makes all of the other orcs at the bottom of the loft start beating each other up too. For no reason. Everyone is stabbing and punching except for one guy who executes a flawless double leg kangaroo kick to punt someone out a window. Huge fan of that guy. While that's all happening, Sam has made his way to the tower as well. So we are now back together immediately. And he's in the process of sneaking inside. It's helpful that a lot of the orcs are already down because they've beaten each other up. But also Sam does straight up stab and kill like 5 separate dudes. Sam eventually finds Frodo in the loft and Frodo is like, okay, first of all, sorry I tried to send you home. Second of all, we're so fucked, dude. They took the ring. And Sam hits him with the, no, they didn't, and pulls out the ring. Earlier, when Sam thought Frodo was dead and he went to hide, he took the ring with him. Smart move. Brutal move. I love this. I love a character having to purposely make a choice that they hate. Anyway, Sam gives the ring back to Frodo, which is pretty huge, and then the two of them steal some orc armor and escape the tower, which means that Team Ring has now officially made it to Mordor. So now all we have to do is get across this lava field filled with thousands of soldiers without any of them noticing us, and also climb an active volcano. We'll get around to it. Over with the others, because we now are basically only 2 groups, except that we've put these guys in the infirmary, and there's these 2 in Rivendell, but no one cares. All of our non-infirmary bound guys are standing around in the Citadel in Minas Tirith having a meeting. Aragorn is like, okay guys, so we do need to launch a full-scale attack against Mordor, and everyone else is like, bro, why? We just fought a huge battle, and we only won it because of the Ghost Army, which we don't have anymore. If we try to defeat Sauron, we will lose. But Aragorn is like, no, this attack wouldn't be us trying to defeat Sauron, it would be us trying to distract Sauron. We would be trying to attract his and his remaining troops' attention away from Mordor to give Frodo a clear path. Gandalf doesn't think that'll work. He thinks that Sauron won't take the bait of what is to him a random tiny army just attacking the gates of Mordor. But Aragorn is like, well, it won't be a random army, because I'm going to use the Palantér that we still have to contact Sauron myself. And I'm going to be like, I'm the rightful prophesized heir to the throne of Gondor, which will make Sauron take us seriously. So that's the plan. Now, you may be wondering, how does this group even know that Frodo and Sam are still alive? How do they have any idea that the ring is anywhere close to where it needs to be for this to work? They don't. All they know for sure is that according to Faramir, Frodo and Sam were heading for Cirith Ungol a few days ago. If they kept moving, they should be nearing the end of the pass by now. So as far as these guys know, at the moment, Frodo is either dead or is about to cross Mordor and needs their help badly. Either way, we do know that Sauron doesn't have the ring yet because the world hasn't gone to shit, but if Frodo's already dead, then that's only a matter of time. So the plan is to launch this diversion on the chance that Frodo is still alive. It is a suicide mission, but it's also our only chance at survival, because it's the only way that Schrodinger's Frodo will be able to destroy the ring. And if the ring doesn't get destroyed, we're all dead anyway. So we decide we are going to launch the diversion. Aragorn does the Palantir thing, which works, except that Sauron also shows him a spooky vision of Arwen. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with that information, other than that it reminds Aragorn that if Sauron wins, Arwen will die, which, like, yeah, so will everyone else. That is a thing that bothers me, actually, where often Elrond is like, well, now Arwen's fate is tied to the ring. Which, like, he's right, but he's only saying that because Arwen could have been immortal and chose not to be. Like, now that she has the capacity to die, her fate is tied to the outcome of this war. Just like the fate of every other thing on Middle-earth that has the capacity to die. But for some reason they act like Arwen is unique in that the outcome of the war will affect her. Or that it will affect her in some way that's worse than how it will affect everyone else. Which is not the case. She's she'll just die. But I guess Elrond just mostly cares about Arwen. Regardless, we're now taking our very diminished army and riding out to the Black Gate to stage our diversion. We mentioned it in the last video, but the Black Gate is up here, and it's like the main entry point to Mordor. So now this group is considered to be in the Black Gate. These two are still in Minas Tirith at the infirmary. By the way, a brief interlude in the Minas Tirith infirmary. Eowyn and Faramir hang out now, and very scandalously, we do see that they're holding hands. It's a little too early to call it, but I am rooting for them. I think they're a power couple. Over with Team Ring, Frodo and Sam find out that the orcs are marching to war, but they don't know why. So they're kind of just like, oh. Nice. However, they are doing very poorly. The closer they get to the volcano where they can destroy the ring, the stronger the ring is. And also they have like no food or water left. They do ditch their heavy orc armor though, which makes it a little bit easier. But overall, not having a good time. At one point, Sam is like, hey, remember earlier when I said we were gonna make it home? I take it back. But we are gonna destroy this ring. Let's do it. Going back to the others, our relevant characters talk to a spokesperson for Sauron. He tells them that Frodo is dead, and Aragorn is like, well, we're gonna fight anyway, and cuts his head off. So Sauron's attention is effectively drawn. We now enter an era of really good lines for both sides of the plot, starting, as all things should, with Legolas and Gimli.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
I could do that.
Aragorn gives a sick pep talk, and then we charge on the gate. I will say, possibly unpopular opinion, I prefer Theoden's speech before Minas Tirith to this one. Theoden's speech is so fucking cool. Ah, the sun rises! So, with the charge, the battle at the Black Gate starts. It's a mess and clearly unwinnable. But again, winning is not the goal here. Regardless, Aragorn somehow parries a troll. Unsure how that works. Also, Gandalf calls for the giant eagles from the first movie to come help them. We will get back to that later. And then over with Frodo and Sam have made it to the volcano where we can destroy the ring, which has had a name all along. It's called Mount Doom. Surely a very nice place. It's also called, what is it, Orodruin, but we're gonna call it Mount Doom. At one point, Frodo collapses on the side of the volcano and can't walk anymore, which brings about one of the most iconic lines in film history from Sam.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you!
So Sam is absolutely tanking it up this volcano with Frodo. They're approaching the convenient lava access door in the side of the mountain, and then Gollum pulls up out of nowhere. Presumably he's been really quietly following us for a while now, which seems like it would be really hard to do, but whatever. We all fight for a bit until Sam engages Gollum and Frodo can make a break for the lava access door. After a minute, Sam is able to follow and he sees Frodo standing at the end of the volcano catwalk that is also conveniently there, exactly where Isildur stood 3,000 years ago when he failed to destroy the ring. So we're here, we've made it all the way to complete our quest, and then Frodo turns around all evil and says, I don't want to destroy the ring. And he refuses to throw it into the volcano, which was what was always going to happen. One of the only magical things that Tolkien was really clear on is that the ring has so much evil power and influence that it is completely impossible for any mortal to willingly destroy it. However, remember back in the first movie when Gandalf said that Gollum had some part to play in this whole quest? This is his main part to play. Gollum sees Frodo standing near the lava, presumably about to destroy the ring, and his addiction to and obsession with the ring forces him to try to stop Frodo from doing that. So he jumps on Frodo and the two of them start fighting over the ring, and in the struggle they both fall over the edge of the lava catwalk. Gollum falls all the way down into the lava, but Frodo has Sam, who is able to pull him up after he grabs onto the side of the cliff. The ring falls with Gollum and both are destroyed. Thank you for your service, Andy Serkis. We did it. So despite both Frodo and Gollum being mortal, they were technically able to destroy the ring. The caveat is that they did it unwillingly and unintentionally, which they obviously couldn't have planned for. Theoretically, that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been able to happen. The ring should have complete control over both of these characters. So why did it happen? Well, towards the beginning of the previous movie, The Two Towers, when Gollum is first helping Frodo and Sam, he promises that he won't hurt them, and he swears it on the ring, which is a very serious thing to do because the ring is super evil and powerful, as we know. And then Gollum broke his oath by intentionally harming Frodo and Sam. So the ring is like, bro, this guy thinks he can just throw my reputation around, use it lightly. I'm gonna teach him to keep my name out of his fucking mouth. Gollum does whatever the ring tells him to do, basically. And because he betrayed it by breaking the oath, it forces him in a roundabout way to cast himself into the lava. But the thing is, he's holding the ring. So when the ring destroys Gollum for his disobedience, it ends up also destroying itself. Tolkien does really love the theme that evil is self-defeating, and ultimately I think he's right. Often I wish it would defeat itself faster, but I think it does get there eventually. How hopeful of me. Anyway, the ring falls into the lava and is destroyed. Sam pulls Frodo up, and quickly the battle at the Black Gate kind of stops because Sauron's tower starts collapsing, and then all of Mordor also starts collapsing, and things are collapsing, is the point. And all of our guys are like, oh my god, they did it. And then the volcano explodes, and everyone is like, oh my god, they're dead. They're not, though. They're running out of the lava access door and onto an outcrop on the side of the volcano. So Frodo and Sam see that Sauron's tower is gone and that their quest has succeeded. But also, there's now lava flowing all around them, so they have no way out. There's nothing they can do. They're just stuck here waiting to die. So they have some time to sit, and they have a conversation about home. They talk about the Shire and Bilbo's party just before they left, and Sam mentions Rosie, who is a girl he had a crush on but was always too afraid to talk to. And he's like, if I were ever to marry someone, it would have been her. So brutal. I think this is when it hits Frodo just how much Sam has done. Like, Sam wasn't given a fate of the world level task to complete. He wasn't told, do this or everyone dies. He was just told, don't leave your friend. And through all of this, he didn't. Cue the most devastating line in history.
I'm glad to be with you, Samwise Gamgee. Here at the end of all things.
Hey, just shoot me in the chest next time, how about? So they sit on the side of the volcano just waiting to die for a while, until, of course, Gandalf appears on the giant eagles that he called earlier and rescues them. Now, about the giant eagles. Yes, we do have to do this. One of the most commonly pitched conundrums about Lord of the Rings is, hey, why didn't we just use the eagles to destroy the ring? It only would have taken them like a few hours to fly that far. It took us a year. And they're clearly super powerful, and there's a bunch of them for like extra defense and support. So technically, there are reasons, like from Tolkien in his letters, as to why the eagles could not have transported the ring. But I think that none of the reasons given are particularly good. So instead, I'm of the opinion that everyone who watches or reads Lord of the Rings has to come up with their own reason why the eagles didn't help. You find that within yourself. Like personally, I think that the eagles weren't there due to scheduling issues. I think that Hollywood only has like one set of really large bird actors, and in like 2002 when they were shooting this movie, those actors had to be on the set of Sinbad of the Seven Seas for the role of the Ice Rock. And yes, I know that that's an animated movie. You still need consultants. Do you not? It's hard to keep giant birds on retainer like that. So that's your homework. Short discussion board reply explaining why the eagles couldn't have destroyed the ring. And full sentences, please. We're trying to maintain our already limited literacy here. Anyway, we've destroyed the ring. We've been rescued by the eagles. We now move into the 6 separate endings of this movie. I should say not different endings. It's not like you can choose your own adventure. Separate as in they are all endings to the movie and they're just in sequence. The last 40 minutes of this movie is just endings. And for the endings, we're gonna need to get the old map out here. She's back. So, ending 1. Frodo wakes up in Rivendell having completed his quest and reunites with the living members of the Fellowship. My favorite thing here is that as every individual person walks into the room, Frodo greets them using their name, except for Legolas. When Legolas walks in, Frodo just kind of looks at him, and this leads me to believe that Frodo potentially does not remember Legolas's name. Throughout these movies, Frodo never speaks directly to Legolas, and Legolas only speaks directly to Frodo once. Anyway, ending 2, Aragorn gets crowned King of Gondor in Minas Tirith, which we have kind of rebuilt. He also like officially gets with Arwen. Whatever. He should have married Legolas. Oh, also Eowyn and Faramir are official too. Slay. Ending 3, 13 months to the day they left, our 4 hobbits return to the Shire. In the book, it's the scouring of the Shire at this point, but that doesn't happen in the movie, so we're ignoring it. They go to the Green Dragon, their local pub, and Sam sees Rosie, that girl he had a crush on. And he decides, fuck it, I lived, bitch, and goes to talk to her, as he should. Sam and Rosie end up getting married an undetermined amount of time later. Everyone is in attendance at the wedding. Ending 4 is 4 years after the ring is destroyed. Over the course of these 4 years, Frodo writes The Lord of the Rings, the story, in the same book as where Bilbo wrote The Hobbit. In the aftermath of everything, Frodo is struggling in the Shire. He's so fundamentally different from who he was before he left for the quest. He asks, how do you pick up the threads of an old life after having gone through so much? And ultimately his answer is that sometimes you can't. Ending 5, Gandalf's purpose on Middle-earth has been fulfilled. He was here to help with Sauron, and Sauron has been defeated. So, he's leaving. The Age of Men has come on Middle-earth, and the elves are leaving for Valinor. So, Gandalf joins them on one of the ships. Our 4 hobbits have come to say goodbye, and then they find out that Frodo is actually also going to Valinor. Frodo tells Sam that he just doesn't belong here anymore, and the toll that the ring took on his mind and body and soul was too much. So as a thank you for destroying the ring, the Valar have granted him passage to Valinor, which is such a pure place that he will actually be able to heal and be at peace. Frodo gives the book, the one that contains the written Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, to Sam and says that the last pages are for him, which is brutal for me personally. And finally, ending 6, Sam goes back home to the Shire, where he's greeted by his wife and kids. I really like that the Lord of the Rings ends with Sam. I think it's nice to see that even if the epic quest is over and things are forever changed, the story does go on in other ways. Actually though, in the books, Sam does also eventually go to Valinor when he's much older, which he's allowed to do because the Valar let Frodo go because he had carried the ring, and Sam technically also carried the ring for a period of time when he thought Frodo was dead by Spider. But that's just in the books. So, that takes us to the end of Return of the King, and to the end of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. I want to say thank you all so much for hanging out with me during this whole thing and listening to me yap about nerd shit. Just as I was finishing the script for this video, the channel actually hit 100,000 subscribers, which is so crazy. I actually wanted to be a YouTuber when I was a kid. YouTube has been a very relevant part of my childhood and of my life in general, and it's just really cool to be on here sharing my ramblings, and it's really cool that there are people who like listening. So again, thanks so much for hanging out. My other socials are in the description. My Patreon is there too if you want to support me and get some cool rewards. For this video, I think it'll be bloopers. I'll definitely also put something up on my Patreon to celebrate 100K, but it'll be on the free tier so like anyone can see it. Anyway, bye.
Do you wear wigs?
No, I do not.
Have you worn wigs?
No, I have not.
Will you wear wigs?
Maybe.
When will you wear wigs?